Hey everybody, how you doing? Tom Kaczynski here. Welcome to Coronavirus Central Unscripted, the Friday version of the show. Today's date is March 27th. It's 7:07 p.m. on the U.S. East Coast. Glad you are all here. And I'll just say hi to everyone here. Joey from the ROC. We got Margot here and Franklin. Good to see you. Christy, Angie, glad you're here. McSparron, always glad to see you guys. So we'll see what we talk about tonight. I don't know what's going to be on the agenda. I was just watching the press conference with President Trump. I don't know if any of you guys were doing that, but that's what I was doing. Held me up for a minute, and I didn't stay to listen to Mike Pence. But we heard the president saying how he's not going to talk to several governors because they play politics with this. So that isn't exactly great for what we expect in terms of long-term outcomes. It's a little bit of a problem. We saw them talking about Cuomo and Inslee. And to be fair, I'm sure there is a lot of politics happening behind the scenes on this. I don't want to minimize that possibility. I think that's very realistic. However, we really do need to begin working together. And frankly, we're doing a piss poor job of it in the United States, as we always do. The only thing we seem to be able to agree upon between Democratic and Republican leadership is how to bail out a whole bunch of really big businesses. And I think one of the more interesting things that came out of Trump's press conference was at the end, he was asked a bunch of questions about it. And he said about, buying different stocks. He said in the worst case scenario, the government ends up owning Boeing. And that's kind of interesting. Nationalization isn't something America has done a whole lot of historically. It's not a terrible idea necessarily if it was part of a design policy plan. There are pros and cons to it. We could argue having it just be something we're okay with that results as a part of a larger strategy. I don't know how I feel about that. Generally not as big a fan. I've been reading a bunch of stories just before the show here. I do my prep like in the last hour. This one's kind of interesting. I put a couple things I've been looking at about someone who said a heart attack was actually the coronavirus. Let's just take weird random points and see if they have any reasoning, right? We got this other one where they're basically moving the command teams into the bunker. That usually means things are going well, if we've ever seen. And this other one's kind of interesting, too. I'll share this one with you. You know how they've been saying keep 6 feet away everywhere you go? You see 6 feet this, 6 feet that. Well, it turns out that's wrong. It needs to be a lot longer. So basically, if you can see someone, you're too close to them, and this is why it continues to spread. We learn all the time how what we thought we knew was wrong and how our ability to determine this virus is constantly changing. Like I talked about on the show this morning, if you guys had a chance to listen to the podcast yet, that's great. If you didn't, what I talked about was that they think there's a different way than the ACE2 pathway this is entering the body. Specifically, I was reading about the C147 pathway, which good luck for me explaining where all of these things are, but there's a lot of different medical ways this could invade people. And that's what's tricky about the coronavirus thing is constantly evolving, constantly changing, and it forces us to change our expectations in accordance with that. So I think that's definitely a big thing. And one other thing I wanted to share with you, see if I can find it real fast here because I don't want to spend all show looking for links, but just things I'm looking at since this is a Friday show and you're not going to get me out reporting this morning, is Brazil basically seems to have a fight inside their government between the president who wants to ignore it, Bolsonaro, and the other governors who do want to follow it. And literally they're putting out ads where they're contradicting each other on TV with government funds. Nice to see how this is happening. I don't know how a virus can be so controversial. I mean, it's happening. I mean, people are getting sick. You look at the countries that are doing this together. They're dealing with it. You look at Italy. You look at Iran. You look at China. You look at Spain. These are not countries that necessarily all play nice with each other all the time or who agree on things. And that's one of the problems with this virus. We're constantly dealing with the fact that people are trying to minimize it. They're trying to put it beneath their different agendas. And if you do that, you're going to end up with a bunch of people dead and a bunch of unhappy people who are going to be mad about that. With the show, it's kind of become an interesting point because when it first started, one of the things I spent a lot of time doing was kind of looking through tea leaves, trying to figure out big things that were happening no one was talking about. And that was kind of easier. Now it's just a whole bunch of news and trying to find the narrative amongst the story is difficult. But that's what I've been trying to do because the object of the show has always been to prepare you for things that are coming, to find ways to make your life more successful, more safe, and to give you a hint what's coming. And I got to tell you, I don't like where civil unrest is going to go with this. I think there's some problems. I think it's really interesting that you see a lot of states now intervening in courts to prevent other states from keeping them out. Like I know Rhode Island supposedly was filing a suit and they were banned from keeping New Yorkers out or something like that. And I know Texas has said that if you fly in from New York, they're going to get you registered at the airport. And if you don't stay in quarantine, you could get $1,000 fine and up to 180 days in jail. Now, mind you, that would create other problems, but I don't imagine New Yorkers think too kindly to what Texas is doing about that. Nonetheless, I do think Texas is kind of sane to do it, except they're going to be in the same boat about a week from now. I mean, the few places that aren't, West Virginia's in the middle, and, as far as Maine, we're full, stay home. Um, but these are some of the things we got to keep an eye on, that you have all these renters out there who, I've been talking to who are worried, and the government's promising them what, $1,200 maybe. A lot of these people have rents that are over 2,000. They can't go to work. They're stuck. And will they get unemployment? Maybe eventually. I mean, the system crashed in half the damn states. They should have just issued a big check. I mean, if they were going to have liquidity, why give it all to the Fed? Why does it always have to go to the banks? But the answer to that question, and we're not going to talk about that because as the people who were here and the people here will attest to this, every time I mention the lending institution that shall not be named, that shall not be named, I literally had this stream cut out on me. And I don't know how it worked out that way, but it did. So if you're here, for the people tuning in, people enjoying the show, click a like, subscribe, do all the things you have to do here, and we will start working through the questions pretty soon. I'm trying to think if there was anything else I really wanted to cover. The big thing I've been trying to understand is what this bill includes, which I'll talk about on Monday, and just what the Fed is doing. I mean, I read these really weird articles about how the Fed is getting into these exotic tools, and as part of that, we're having a lot of things that banks are not supposed to be allowed to buy certain things, but the collateralization of the assets of the United States of America is a major concern to yours truly. And to me, it looks like what is happening is that the banks are setting up to work with the government to take ownership of a lot of different things. Now, the question of who is screwing who is always a relevant one when you look at these sorts of questions. But nonetheless, from what I can discern, I'm thinking that what's actually happening is that we are going to see situations where the solution to this has literally been to basically turn credit into collateral and make some hybrid between the Treasury and the Fed. And if that happens, man, some people think the Fed is going to get the better of it, some think the Treasury. I've studied my history. It's not often the Treasury gets the better of the bank, and that's just the way that goes. So let's hope I'm wrong. We'll see what ends up happening here and how that goes. But I shared an article from Yahoo News, so you have a chance to take a look at this. And hopefully that will be helpful to you. So you guys have a lot of questions. I want to spend my time talking about what you have to say. Anything you want to bring up, no matter how esoteric, we'll try to deal with it. Just be warned, I will answer you if I can. And do try to be nice to one another. We don't have any of our mods here tonight. And if I have to do it, then you have to watch me play around with that for 90 seconds while I figure out how to do what 6-year-old can do in 2 seconds. Okay. And I hope everyone's having a very nice evening. Let me know what's happening in your area. I'm always looking to find out. And, things are getting bad in New York, obviously. This is spreading around the U.S. We're up to, 100,000 cases. Let's give you the quick update since that's one of the things I always like to do on these shows, just to see what the numbers are actually at, because I haven't even peeked in the last few hours. Great. We have a new color for the United States. We're going to pass 600,000 cases today worldwide. Awesome. So we're at 27,025 deaths with 132,000. Exciting, right? Let's see what else we got here. And I'm going to change the region because I don't trust the Chinese numbers. Speaking of which, have you guys seen over in Hubei, there was a big fight at the Hubei-Shanghai border where I guess the police from one province were arresting the police from the other province because they were trying to come out of the quarantine or something. It was a mess. It looks like things are a little bit shaky over there in China. But anyway, I just want to do a quick math thing that I do every episode, and I just do real quick what the death rate is over the recovered rate, because I'm always really curious about that, because those are the cases that are actually resolved. But the problem you run into, let's see, it's 81, 212, 212. So right now we have, of the resolved cases, 29.22% ended up in death, which is interesting. And I've been sharing all these stories about people dying from the coronavirus that we didn't think were dying from the coronavirus. Like this story about a heart attack that was supposedly the coronavirus in New York, or all these people who died in their homes in Italy that weren't accounted for because no one ever tested them before they were sent to the morgue. So they just died from some reason that's unknown. And we don't know the numbers. And so you read all these different models that are out there, right? And I'm not saying which one's right or wrong, but all of them are all over the place because they don't know how many people are really dying. The statistics are fuzzy as hell. And we really don't understand the long-term impacts of this disease and the number of people who are sick or not sick, what asymptomatic carriers mean, what strains there. I mean, this is like a guessing game, honestly. It's like you roll a dice and you see what you get with it. It really is playing Russian roulette with COVID, down to the 1 in 6 chance of getting really messed up by it. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But I was saying, I was looking at the numbers. I got distracted. 101,724 for the U.S., 1,586 deaths, 1,864 recoveries. That's a gain of 383 deaths. That's pretty bad. Italy went up a lot today, too. 919 deaths are up to 9134 on 86,498 cases. Just huge numbers. Spain, 64,285. Germany, 58,71. Or I should say 50,871. 33,109 for France. 32,332 for Iran. UK's moving up. We knew that was going to happen. Anglosphere, right? 14,688. And Switzerland's at 12,928. Numbers are just getting big all over across the board. Spain up to 4,940 deaths. Very big numbers. So that's what's looking at like, that's what it's looking like around the world right now. And for those in the United States, we'll just look what our state leaders are. We'll read real fast. I'm sure New York will be number one, as it always is. New York, 44,810. New Jersey, 88,25. California, 45,98. Washington, 3,700. And Michigan at 36.57, Illinois 30.26, Florida 24.84, Massachusetts 24.17, Louisiana 23.05. And if you're not on that list, you're not over 2,000. So that's good news. Everyone seems to be catching up. Safest place in America right now, the Northern Mariana Islands. Let's all go there. If you have to be in a state, good luck if you're in South Dakota. They are the lowest number, 46. So there you go. Wyoming is losing. They're at 53. Okay, let's give you that. So that's your update. Let's see, Joey from the ROC. Does that mean the Republic of China, or are you just being funny? So that's Taiwan, Team Virus. Well, I'm sure we got, what's interesting, since you mentioned that, I mean, and I don't want to trivialize it, there are actually a lot of people who do see the virus as having some function in revealing a lot of things that are really troubling about our society. And I think part of the nihilism about why some people at least approach it the way they do is because they conceive of our society as something so messed up that anything that changes it is welcome, and that it's so, ossified, it's so structurally rigid that they want something different. So, of course, I don't want anyone to suffer, but there are going to be changes that happen, and some of them are well needed. So we'll see what happens as we go forward. Margot says, hope you're feeling well. I hope so for you too. Franklin, good to see you. Glad I found the podcast a few days ago. I hope you were enjoying it, Franklin. Share it with others. And always let me know what you think. Leave positive comments. And if you ever have questions, I'm not hard to find. Joey asks, how long do you guys think we have before there's widespread looting in New York? So one of the interesting things, since you mentioned that, is New York now has 11% of their police force calling off, which is why that's happening is sort of an interesting question. I know that they screwed up the PPE and that's part of the reason why it's happening. I would guess that there are other people who are in self-quarantine just to be safe. In fact, Miles Miller reported that there were 4,111 cops, or 11.4% were out sick today as the department grapples with COVID-19. 442 cops and 70 civilians tested positive for the virus. So things in New York might get a little dicey in a little bit. I don't know. It depends how the people behave. In theory, you would expect people to be staying home. But, one of the things that's happening is you have jobs shutting down, right? You end up, and that being the case, you have this other problem that ends up happening where you have people who have been living on the margins who can't get support by any of these programs. And I'm not saying that that's a good or bad thing, but it is the reality of it. They're going to be out milling around looking for ways to get access to resources. It probably will get a little rough in cities or in places where you have, populations that exist in an underground economy. We'll say it that way. And that can be rural areas too. If you have a place in town where you have a giant meat packing plant, right? And they can't bring people in, although it seems like they're making exceptions for agriculture. I did a story on the show today. We're talking about 2.5 million people in ag alone who are basically here not legally. And if you take that number out, let's say it's 20 million people here illegally. No one really knows the numbers, but those are people who are going to be moving about who won't get public assistance. And, I understand why, government probably won't pay them, but fundamentally the problem is they're still moving around. So if your goal is to have a quarantine, then you have to think about these sorts of issues. And it's a hard thing. I mean, honestly, you would get filleted if you were a Republican saying that you need to take care of the illegals in this moment. Nonetheless, if you don't, they're going to spread it. If you let 20 million people spread the virus, then you can shut down the economy, cost yourself trillions of dollars, and not accomplish a damn thing. It's kind of a hard spot to be in, but this is what it is. We are now on a boat together. We don't have to like each other. We don't have to love each other. We don't have to even want to talk to each other. But fundamentally, we're going to have to figure out how to get off it together. It's like one of those stupid horror movies they have. You send that group of people there and you try to survive. I'm serving as your resident hillbilly here, I'll try to look a little gangster for the rest of this show. Does that work? All right, let's go with that. So anyway, but how long do I think there is until we have widespread looting in New York City? New York City has to collapse first. If New York City's going to have widespread looting, here's how it will happen. It will happen if you have the food supply really stop. Right now, I would rate the odds of that problem as low, but that may evolve in a different way. And I can't tell you if it will or won't. I can tell you I will be reporting on it. It depends if there's more places that get locked down and more people who decide to stay at home. And trucking is an interesting business, as is all logistics. A lot of these people are independent operators. And what ends up happening is, in the end, if New York doesn't get supplies coming in, you're going to have probably the Defense Logistics Agency have to jump in and try to help. So if you're a New Yorker and you're living in that situation and you don't want to be eating rat on a stick when you go hunting in the subways, you probably want to have a little extra food just in case things go backwards. I'm not predicting that right now. The thing is, a medical collapse. Let's take the worst case scenario where you have 15% of people die from the medical system collapsing. That intrinsically isn't going to collapse the rest of society, but all the economic damage around it and all the chaos that comes from the fear that you feel with that is a real problem. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But I think in terms of New York specifically, that the resource questions of resources getting in, there's the short-term risk. The medium-term risk is that if we sort of go through an in and out, sort of flatten, let's put restrictions in and out sort of way of thinking, you might end up with a situation where the economics run really backwards. And I could imagine if the city had it happen where, you gave people rent amnesty, let's say for 3 months, and then you tell them it's all due and a whole bunch of people get evicted. I imagine, a mob rushing up from the Village to the Upper East Side or something like that, or maybe coming down from Harlem to go ahead and, redistribute things more forcefully. And that's one of the dangers of this. Especially considering that this response has been politicized. We saw today the president was calling out the governors of Washington and Michigan that he doesn't like talking to them. You got to get past that. There's people I wouldn't like talking to either, but ultimately, people have to be bigger in this moment. And New Yorkers are pretty good at that. You guys are a tough crowd. My mother was a New Yorker, so I know the city well. I think you'll be okay for the moment, but watch that food supply thing. That could be the issue. And if people begin rioting, you have a police force. It'll be interesting to see if the people of New York decide that they want to have these issues not happen, or if they want to go ahead and have their police be activated to go ahead and solve problems viscerally. A lot of times what has happened historically is when you have a plague or a pandemic and someone is caught cheating on something, they would instant immediate justice in the theory that it prevented people. This is when hangings and guillotines happen, right? And I'm not saying that that's necessarily what should happen, but I'm saying that if problems start happening, people can't get fed and there are hooligans running around and the police decides to make a stand, there's going to be a lot of people who support that. So just consider how that's going to play out. And that doesn't necessarily mean the police will even do it. One of the stories I hear from New York so often is the first responders really felt like they got screwed after 9/11. I don't want to get into all the politics and the issues of that were caught up in it, but a lot of people said this wasn't going to happen to us again. And I sort of wonder how much laid back the police is going to be. I don't have the answer to that. I am not close enough to it, but I've read more than one story about it and more than one commentary. You guys will have to tell me. You're over there in the trenches. Let's see. Betsy DeVos speaking after Trump. Yeah, it's not so great sometimes. Angie, hello from Tennessee. God bless. Hope all is well down there in the what's Tennessee called? Not the Bluegrass State. That's Kentucky. What's that? America's. The Volunteer State. That's what you guys are called. All right, Christy asks, Tom, why did Tom Hanks not describe more specifically his symptoms as we all anxiously were rating his trusted insight? Well, that's because he knew that we knew that he knew that we knew. Okay, unless you've watched The Burbs and have a real appreciation of 80s movies, that's probably not as funny to you as it is to me. I don't know why he did or did not do what he did. Presumably, he wasn't feeling very well. I've known a COVID survivor. So, I mean, it's just really people experience this so differently. Some people get through it very lightly. Some people have a lot of really bad problems. What you end up with is kind of a crapshoot. So, we'll see what happens with that. Hopefully, he'll be okay. Obviously, I'm not wishing anything bad to anyone out of this. Do I think he was advised not to? I don't know what he was advised, to be honest with you. Maybe. I mean, I guess it would probably be smart because you don't want to lead people to false expectations, in terms of what you'd have. So Franklin says they closed the gun stores here in LA. I've heard there are a couple lawsuits pending about that in different states where there were states that looked to close the gun stores. In fact, it was in Pennsylvania. I remember this because Tom Wolfe wanted to close it. I was hearing about that from someone who lives up there. And they said they have to be open on certain limited hours because they can't be shut down. I guess there was a whole legal issue. Now, I don't know what the Ninth Circuit Court and the California Supreme Court will do. It's interesting, actually. So many first-time gun buyers. Welcome to the right wing, right? No, I'm just joking. But no, I mean, the idea that you should be able to protect yourself is a constitutional right and it's a personal responsibility. I don't blame anyone for exercising it. And this is a time when it might be wise to do that. So I don't know if LA is closing them. I imagine there will be some open in California. Although I've heard from people who were trying to get checks just a week or two ago that it was taking forever to work your way through the system. And for those who've never purchased a gun, you go through a background check in a lot of states. You call into some registry. It's different everywhere how it works a little bit. And then they verify that you're okay. You're not like a violent felon or something. So, Michael, good to see you. Good evening, my man. All right. McSparron, I hope you and Dana are doing okay. Things are getting pressurized this week in our family. Sister is a nurse. She sat with her first COVID patient in isolation today who was on ventilator and dying. Well, please let your sister know that our prayers will be with her as well as the patient who's experiencing this. That's really heavy and traumatic. And we're going to see a lot of this. I shared actually a video of an intensive care nurse. I think she was in Michigan, if I remember right. She was telling about her experience. It was somewhat similar to this, and she broke down and she cried. And look, I don't know how else to put it, man. This is going to be a tough time. We probably, before this is done, statistically speaking, all of us are going to lose someone we know. A lot of us are going to know someone who's close to us. It's going to be hard, and it's going to be painful. And I'm not the person to tell people how to deal with trauma. I mean, I'm sort of a rock when it comes to certain things. I will do my best to be in front of it, be a voice, an ear to listen, do the things that I can do, and try to help. But, preparing for something of this scope is beyond what most people can. And just realize, look at what's happening in those other countries and realize that's a risk to you. And to the extent you're capable, man, don't put yourself in position to be in risk for that, unless you're a first-line responder, and then God bless you for having the courage. It's really going to be dangerous. So, let's see. Angie writes, our med staff suggestion is to wear diapers on your face. Are you kidding? You might not be kidding. That might be possible. Well, I guess it's better than nothing, right? I mean, I don't know how well. I mean, it's absorbent, right? So I would think maybe that provides some protection. But that's, yeah. If you hear noises in the background, apparently the wife is eating cereal, if my guess is right. So it's pretzels. I stand corrected. Fake news. Okay, that's fine. Well, yeah, I'm salty enough for anybody. All right, let's continue. So our med staff suggestion is to wear diapers on your face. That's pretty wild, but I guess we're going to see a lot of improvisation. If you've never used duct tape as a part of your arsenal, be ready. It's coming. So Sarah writes, good question. Will the stimulus and extended unemployment benefits be enough to keep the looting at bay for a bit? Thoughts? All right, so here's the first question. The first question is, will the food supply continue? So if the food supply continues and you can afford it, yes. If that doesn't happen, or the power goes out, or you have something really weird like violence break out everywhere, then no, it won't matter. The problem with the unemployment benefits and the stimulus isn't enough. $1,200 or $600 for people living on disability or fixed income isn't going to get you much more than 2 trips of groceries if you're seriously shopping. And the rent problem, the mortgage problem, the lack of things to do. I don't think looting is going to start real quick if it happens. And I don't think it's going to start unless we have supply shortages. So we'll have to see how well the government's handling that question. Given what I've seen from them on everything else, I wouldn't bet on a lot of confidence. But I would bet on one thing, that New York's going to be the first place you see that problem happen, because the logistical problems of New York and I say this as someone who worked in logistics for 3 years and was a driver on the road for 2 years, are far greater than anywhere else in the U.S. San Francisco is pretty bad, but you have a lot of issues where California has its own produce near it. They'll come in more easily, I think, whereas Appalachia and the East Coast don't particularly like each other. Mm. And you're not going to see a lot of drivers volunteer to come in from central Pennsylvania or, from western New York. Just it doesn't work that way. There's acrimonies there that are relevant. And, of course, now you might get around some of that. But will I be drinking from a bottle night? But anyway, I do think the extended unemployment benefit's interesting. And one of the things I did want to mention with that, if you don't know, if you're someone who is self-employed, and you can prove – I don't know the final details of this because the bill hadn't been passed yet. But if you made over a certain amount, I think in the last tax year, and you were self-employed, theoretically, you may be eligible for unemployment, even though you are self-employed as part of the economic slowdown. One article I read earlier today that was saying there was a poll out that apparently a quarter of Americans have now lost their job. And that was kind of a crazy number. I want to make sure I put that in front of you because I don't want to say this wrong. That's a big comment to make. But this is a poll. This is from newstrust.org through Reuters. And it says nearly 1 in 4 U.S. adults have said they've been laid off or furloughed during the coronavirus outbreak. Now, do I think that this is 100% accurate? I don't know. But one of the things that was interesting is only 19% said they would like to end the social distancing as soon as possible to get the economy going again, including 11% of Democrats and 30% of Republicans. So it seems like everyone's enjoying the staycation, as it were, and I think that's smart. I mean, really, I've seen the numbers on the polling. Only about 10 to 20% of people are actually going out there saying that, they want to go out and put themselves at risk. I wouldn't do it, and hopefully your state allows you to not be in a spot where that's a big problem. But the looting, if it happens, let's keep an eye on that. And if we have this go real hot and fast, it might not be an issue. If we stretch it out, probably mid to late April, maybe early May, we'll have a feeling if there's going to be problems. But the other thing, too, that could cause the looting is simpler. If you're out there and the government says everything's fine, like it's been projecting confidence, and a whole bunch of people die and everyone's mad, including young people start to die, or God forbid, kids start dying, for whatever reason. And I'm not predicting that. There's nothing in the evidence to predict that. But then there wasn't a lot out there about what we expected from coronavirus ahead of time. These are sort of things that could change the equation. So let's see what happens there. Let's see. McSparron, positive note, we reached the 14-day marker for both of us in our home. No symptoms. Good for you. I am glad to hear that, Michael. Good to see you. Christy, will Tom be drinking from a bottle tonight? We hope. You guys like when I drink. My wife doesn't like when I drink.
I saw you got that Corona in there.
I'm not. Well, I could be, but that's a beer. They're asking if I'm going to drink a whole bottle of wine. And for the record, I did not drink the whole bottle. Half the bottle was gone. So that was it. Although I did afterwards have one shot of scotch, which helped. But
you had scotch?
Yeah, I did. It was awesome. Anyways, yeah, Johnny Walker Black Label. Fun times. No, I'm not planning on drinking tonight, just because I'm pretty tired tonight. Though I will at some point. I actually am in a good place mentally, which was hard. This was a really hard week. I don't know. Some of you maybe got a chance to listen to some of the podcasts. If you didn't, I covered some really dark, heavy topics, especially on Wednesday, near the end of the show, and Thursday. I mean, reading those documents about the ethics of who gets killed and who doesn't, that they literally are going to consider, and I understand why, but that they're going to consider taking ventilators from people who are under treatment to try to keep more people alive. That's a really hard spot to be in. And I just, that sits very poorly with me. And if I was a doctor, I don't think I could do that. I mean, honestly, you can't make that promise and then live up to it. But that's why they're making boards to do it. And, you sort of wonder, I mean, I guess a part of you always wonders, do you want to allow someone to make that decision? And I just wouldn't feel comfortable. I think that they'd be better telling people, look, we can't help you, than doing that. Because if not, you talk about violence and riots. You go into a hospital, you have a bunch of people being brought in, told they would live, and then someone has to know that they're getting their tubes ripped out so others can live. I think that's when you get riots. Or I'll give you an example. If you can't go in and talk to your family and have a last word, or at least have a video conference. I mean, it's one of the things I've read about this that's really disturbing to people is that what a lonely way to die it is, and that people are conscious. They're conscious to the very end. And it's not that their brain is negatively infected in a lot of cases. It's literally that they're drowning in their own fluids. It's really an ugly way to go. It's terrible. So just avoid that if you can. It's so important. So let's see here. Slamurai, good to see you. Glad you're here every night. Aster, good to see you. Sorry you guys are having so much news down there. It's always sad, but I hope things improve in Louisiana. Jennifer, glad you're here. Thank you for sharing all that information. The information about Westchester, awesome. Really appreciate it. James, good to see you. Hi to Renee, all the kids. Seen that. That's my younger brother. My kid brother's here. Angie says, I don't watch Trump no more. Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, watching those press conferences are brutal. I think every time he goes on there, he causes more problems. I wish he would just like. Trump is good at certain things. Pressure is just not one of them, unless you just want to watch one-liners and zingers and partisan warfare. There are times that can be entertaining from a certain point of view. This ain't one of them. They really need to approach this with more seriousness. People are looking to that level of leadership, and I can get on some level probably being frustrated because this whole response is a mess. I mean, I've had a chance to talk to some people who are involved in implementation. Let's put it that way. And one of the things that I've learned is that the plan they had for this, they had something called an influenza plan, which was designed for something that was a mere fraction of this. And so they basically had to come up with a solution from scratch. And the CDC flubbed the hell out of the tests from the beginning. So they started on the back foot. There were a lot of problems, and the administration has tried to move forward in some ways. And really, the actions in terms of what they've been doing, other than being slow, are probably the right actions. But you have the issues between the states, you have the issues with the corporate actors, and then you have all the issues about that ultimately the Congress basically just threw up a bunch of pork. Now, I don't know how many people saw it. Earlier today, Tom Massey, Republican from Kentucky, was being pilloried for holding up the coronavirus, stimulus bill. But maybe he wasn't wrong. And I'm not saying this from the perspective of being a cheap bastard. I'm saying this from the perspective of, look who's being helped by this. I'm not crazy about what's happening. What they're saying for unemployment is they're going to promise you $600 a week, I think, for up to 4 months, which isn't terrible, but for a lot of people, that might not be enough, and a lot of people won't qualify, as well as the one-time stimulus check. But fundamentally, the government's getting involved in buying a lot of toxic assets. And you still have the problem that the Fed is basically putting out $4 trillion, and they're going to inflate the hell out of this. So you might have a lot of money, but I wonder what you're going to be able to buy with that money, because if you have an inflationary currency, at the same time you have a deflationary economy, that's saying that stuff is worth more and your dollar purchases less. That's when you can get runaway inflation. There's actual videos of this, not videos, pictures of this. I'm not making it up. In Germany, as they were going through the Great Depression, it was so bad that they took wheelbarrows of Reichsmarks to go shopping at the supermarket. Now, a digital currency hides that exchange rate, but fundamentally, we're doing the same basic things, and that's going to lead to a debt default. And that's why a lot of people are worried about economically, but the people who are most worried and who own a lot of our Congress are going forward and getting in there first, trying to get as much money and assets so that they can survive the consequences of their own actions and collateralize the debt onto us through taxes, the taxpayer, and whatever else we pay in terms of direct bailouts. It's not good and it's not just, and it just really sits badly with me. I'm not saying that, the bill, I get why they passed it. I understand that, politics, whatever. But realistically, this could have been a lot simpler. It should have been a lot faster, and it could have been something we did much better. So we'll continue here. Let's see. Slamurai writes, I got banned from Coronavirus Central for confirming Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. Send me a message on Telegram, and I'll take a look at it if there's an issue there, and I will see if I can get you reinstated. You probably ran afoul of, I can imagine what happened. That probably wasn't what you should have been talking about, although that's probably true, but that's neither here nor there. I'll help you out. All right. Skittles Lotus. Hell yeah, we do. Good to see you here. Glad you're here, Skittles. Let's see. Our Illinois governor called POTUS out on Twitter, so now our state is screwed. Well, you did have Chicago. I'm just kidding. No, your state is not screwed. One thing is Illinois has actually been pretty far ahead of this. And actually, to tell you the truth, Mike Pence is heading up a lot of the response effort. Trump is doing the public relations side, and perhaps that's better. Pence was a governor of Indiana, so he'll be familiar with Illinois. And I think they're doing a good job for the most part getting in front of things. We'll see how things shake out in Chicago. I don't know how that's going to work out, but I do know that they're at the cutting edge, actually, of getting ventilators out there. And you're going to see some good and big news developing soon down there that will help meet some of those needs. Your issue is probably going to be in Illinois is staffing and PPE. But, the other problem, too, I will tell you this. You have this national stockpile that's designed for a single emergency. States are going to fight each other over this, and it's kind of a bad spot because there's not enough to begin with, but that's where we're at. I mean, your state really needs to work on its own solutions, whatever state you live in. Don't count on someone else to help you. It really won't work. Let's see. Franklin says we need to nationalize big tech if we want to root out the other problem besides Wall Street. So it's an interesting thought. I mean, the problem is, big tech in a lot of ways is really deep in bed with the DoD and has been for a very long time. You look at there was that big fight; they were going to put it in the Amazon cloud, and it's kind of interesting, right? Because on the one hand, Jeff Bezos owns Amazon. He also owns the Washington Post, which puts out the primary narrative in the U.S. He also owns the biggest distributor. He's trying to buy the biggest logistics line. And on top of all of that, Amazon has Alexa sitting in all your houses, and it listens to what you say. You can find the studies out there. There's a lot on this. I'm not making this up. This really does happen. You can read all the fine print. And you have these people working with defense, with DARPA and other entities to provide cloud computing services for the whole U.S. government. So the idea that the federal government isn't in bed already with big tech, that probably isn't true. The problem is the part of the government, the permanent bureaucracy that's in bed with Silicon Valley, just doesn't care about what we vote for. And that's kind of the interesting thing of how politics works, if you really understand it. There's 5 branches of government. You hear there's 3 branches. Okay, you've heard of the executive, legislative, and judiciary. Okay, those are the trappings. There's the permanent bureaucracy, which actually runs things and is the moving house that goes with the private sector. And then there's the military, which is the last resort thing that either does serves as defense for everything else or decides to wipe it clean if it gets too bad. And those 2 parts of the government are ones we probably need to keep a closer eye on as we go forward, especially since, like I was showing you, they're literally moving the command teams for Homeland Defense into the underground bunkers. When that ends up happening, you kind of want to know why they're doing it. And that's not the sort of thing you do if it's just the flu, bro. So let's continue. Ashley, good to see you here. Tom, wondering your thoughts on the accuracy of the testing. I have all the symptoms of the virus and was just tested this week, throat swab, and it was negative. Having a hard time believing this result. So it really depends on what test you take, right? So some of these ones have pretty high occurrence of false negatives. The PCR tests are notorious for doing that because realistically, they don't really get deep enough. Where this virus tends to hit people when they get really sick is lower. There was one example of a guy I saw that they found it in his autopsy. He had tested negative for 5 times, but they literally only when they autopsied the bottom of his lungs, they found this. And one of the reasons that can be that is that we probably have an incorrect understanding of how people are getting infected. Yes, you can be infected through the throat. You can also be infected through the eyelids. You can be infected through the nose. You can be infected through fecal pathways, which suggests it might go up as well as down. And all these things being the case, if you're swabbing where the virus isn't, you might not find it, even though you have the symptoms. And that's why the research we were doing in the CL147 pathway that I mentioned in other ones like Dr. Paul Cottrell has been talking about are actually really fascinating because when you look at them, there are other options. So I'm not saying you have the virus or you don't have the virus, but I am saying that that test may not have been accurate. Now, what's the average testing on some of these? I've read it on the PCRs. It's about 70%. They say that they're getting better and more accurate. I can't tell you that I have verified studies of the quality of the testing. So we'll see about what happens there. So thanks for that question. Great question. Hopefully my answer helped you. I would say if you think you have it, up the vitamin C, up the zinc if you have that. I think those are pretty safe suggestions. Is there anything you think I should add to that for someone who thinks they might have it, things they could do that's easy at home to just fortify their immune system?
I'm going to make that concoction with ginger root, garlic,
okay,
lemon.
Ginger, garlic root, and that. And you know, if you
put it
have
all together and you boil it,
and
then you drink it twice a day, and then you eat all the little bits and stuff.
She makes a good point with the ginger garlic root thing. One thing I read they did in China, which they claimed helped for people who got in trouble, was they drank hot liquids frequently, and apparently that helped clean some of the things out. That were, if your infection was in the upper respiratory area, instead of having it go into the lungs, you can get some of it into the digestive tract, where the stomach juices can kill it. Apparently, they really tried that.
Well, the ginger and the garlic heats your body up. So
So
You've eaten garlic.
Yeah, no, of
ginger.
course
You
I've
know
eaten
how
garlic.
spicy it is.
So would eating peppers work by the same logic? Probably not. Maybe.
I mean, cayenne's really great for sinus stuff. I mean, why not? Throw it in there.
That's right. It'll come out one way or the other, right? Go spicy. So, all right. So there's some thoughts to share with you, some folk wisdom here from up here in the sticks of Maine. So James writes, if it's airborne or touch transmitted, good luck. Yeah, no, don't. You got to be careful. You got to be mindful and wear your goggles, wear your mask. One day I'll come out with my full, I'll put on the gas mask. You guys will have fun. It's actually kind of creepy if you've never worn one. It's hard to breathe when you're like, Luke, I am the virus. Sorry. Was that good?
No, it's awful.
Thank you. Okay, and James says hi to you, dear. So let's see. I tried Como's hand sanitizer today. He might be a disappointment, but that is no joke. It is powerful. Well, yeah, hand sanitizer, if you ever need to make him, the primary thing in hand sanitizer, I think, is alcohol. They actually had a distillery in DC making it, so that's kind of what it ends up being. You could probably make, there's a lot of recipes on YouTube if you want to figure out how to make hand sanitizer. Good to see you, Brian. Glad you are here. Thanks for visiting us today. Franklin writes, it's a consequence of the reflexive use of anything for political purposes. Bolsonaro's election was ridiculous, and well, I understand why he got elected, but the way he's handling this is definitely very bad. So I try to be politically neutral on here. You all know I'm really not, but I will pretend unless you make me talk politics. If you do, shame on you because you'll cost me viewers. All right. Marina, good to see you. Hello, everyone. And see, my brother's writing about a revolution. That's good. I'm glad to see he's excited tonight. Thoughts on Trump's speech yesterday, Sarah said. He seemed to give a lot less hope of his Easter opening of the country today. Maybe his medical team talked to him last day. He is so up and down. So let me explain something about Donald Trump. Donald Trump went to... You can't understand Donald Trump unless you understand a guy called Norman Vincent Peale. He went to something called what was it called? It was the School of Positive Thinking. They had like a whole church around this. It was kind of crazy how it worked. But the whole idea was that you activate what you want in life. You've heard of like the power of attraction, right? That if you go out and you present a positive vision of something, you'll make it happen. That's like a big part of his personal philosophy. So when he goes out there and says things that seem like they're disconnected from reality, what he is trying to do in his own mind is he's trying to actualize a reality he wants to see happen. And I know that will probably sound crazy to some of you, but it's really not as crazy as it sounds, because you have to basically believe you can achieve something before you get to a point. That's one of the things that you kind of learn as you go through things. And I'm not saying that it makes reality fake. That's not it. But that there is something to how you visualize the future and how it ends up going and how people act. For instance, in the world we live in where the virus is real, we're acting safely, whereas other people have created an alternate reality that really does work for them until it doesn't, and eventually nature intrudes. Obviously, nature is real, and nature is what we observe together. But there are times where you try to do that, and that's kind of what Trump goes into. But I know his medical team has to be giving him some advice that's all over the place, and I hope that he's showing more caution and patience. And to the extent I think he was, I watched the press conference today. I didn't see yesterday's, but I am familiar with what he said. I think that he looked tired. And how could you not look tired? I mean, it's hard because if Trump, here's what you would have had to do. You would have had to do an authoritarian response like China did to succeed. And I wonder if Trump had gone ahead and done that as early as, like, if I was your president, okay, and I was in there, I would have started doing things in February. You would have thought, this guy's nuts. Who did we put in here? This hypochondriac, this crazy germaphobe. And then you'd be like, oh, it would have been fine. Or if the thing about politics, it's funny, is you never get credit for your successes. If you do something to prevent a terrible disaster, you're someone who caused fear for no reason. And this is like one of the things you deal with. It's just exhausting. Now, I'm not here to exonerate President Trump in any way, shape, or form. They need to be a lot better, a lot crisper, and they need to be better at working with one another. But since you asked the question, do I think he's particularly hopeful? He said one thing that I thought was really telling in the speech today, because they asked him in the presser if he thought this was going to be over and, by Easter. He's like, look, this may take a while. It may take until Q4 where we have a full recovery. It may take past that. For those who don't follow economics, that means he was saying that this may be a problem for the rest of the whole year. And if it is, good luck seeing what's going to happen in an election. I don't even know. I mean, and this is a weird election, man, because, the truth of it is Joe Biden, if you know his history, that's a big banking credit family going back into Delaware for a very long time, and there's problems there. So if people get pissed off about who gets bailed out, we may see third-party options or something independent emerge we're not expecting. What does that mean for the longer term? I don't know. But I know a lot of people are going to be unhappy about what's happening, and there hasn't been a constituency for sanity. We'll see what happens. So let's see. Astor writes 2,700 cases in Louisiana, 119 deaths. So absolutely. Let's see. Brian writes, I don't go out a lot, but I always carry. I have no problem with that. Keeps everyone safe, and I support that. Guns do not scare me. I grew up playing cowboys and Indians. That's how it was in Arizona when we were kids. When I was a kid, you could make jokes about things and people didn't get offended. And some of them were mean, but they still didn't get offended. It's just different. I guess things change over time. Let's see what else we got here. I am small business. I clean. They need trust before they let me restart. And I hope you have a chance to restart soon. I mean, obviously, Angie, we want you to be safe. That's the most important thing. So Franklin writes, my quick explanation of the Fed a few days ago was the clearest I've heard. Creating money out of nothing and charging interest on it. When people give you really long, complicated explanations for things, that's usually because they're trying to hide something that would really piss you off. It's obvious. You ever have someone come to you, they do something wrong, and they start apologizing and be like, I didn't mean, or like, I'll give you an example. And my wife would never do this, but I'm sure someone's wife would, where they would come to you and they'd be like, honey, I bought something. And you say, oh, how much is it? Well, it was a really good deal. First, you get the description. Then you get the discount savings. You get all the marketing up front before you get the actual product. That's what happens with the Fed. Quantitative easing is inflation. That's all it is. Yeah?
That's terrible.
It's true.
I always tell you.
No, I know. I said my wife doesn't do that. I make sure I exempted you.
Do that, but...
Well, I wasn't going to say that. I'm smart. I'm a veteran husband. I know what to say and what not to say.
Because it is really a good deal.
Spoken from the mouth of the woman herself here. LA County is waiting for New York levels a week from now. I don't think LA is going to be as bad as New York in one reason. Just this one reason, because LA is more spread out. The fact that you have highways separating people and things commute, be grateful for the first time in your life for the fact that I-5 is a parking lot. It kept you separated from each other, whereas the subway in New York is quite efficient. And to that extent, I actually think cities with mass transit that is really much more effective are going to be in bigger trouble. That's why I think San Francisco, Chicago, New York, probably Boston, Washington are cities to watch, as we go forward here. But let's see. I'm happy with Governor Newsom's leadership. I think he'll make the lockdown more severe if he thinks this work's necessary. Maybe not doing it yet because it's not feasible. Yeah, maybe. I mean, and that's one of the reasons why you've had a detached response, because the truth is, in this country, if the president had gone forward and done a full lockdown, I could imagine what would be trending on Twitter right now. And letting governors do it is actually more efficient, and letting things get more local. That was part of their deliberate design, and I don't think it was a bad idea. I think there's going to be issues that come out of that, and we're going to see, because I don't think there's enough resources if this stays bad a long time for the whole country to work together very well. You guys in California may be on your own at some point, and we'll see what happens on that, both autonomously for a little while and what that means in the longer term. I mean, look, you guys live differently than the rest of the country. I mean, I'm not trying to be insulting. It's just a known thing. So we'll see what ends up happening out of that. And, this is how things happen. In the ancient Roman Empire, Justinian tried to reunite the empire and he failed because of a plague. Kind of wonder if we're in the same boat. Let's see what we got here. What am I drinking tonight? I am drinking awesome tea that was made by Dana herself. I did add a little cream to it, but what flavor am I drinking? Is this the maple chai? Kind of tasted like the maple chai.
I think it is the maple chai.
I love the maple chai. But yeah, I'm drinking like a nice, calm old man tonight, so I'm not getting too crazy for you guys. We'll see. Eventually, I'll have to think of a reason. Maybe we'll do. Maybe, what I wish I could do? I wish we had a good cause to support. I mean, of course, I'm a good cause. P.O. Box 35, Greenville Junction, Maine, 04442. But fundamentally, I wouldn't mind doing maybe a charity thing for someone one night. We'll do an event for something, maybe. I think that would be good. And maybe I'll let you guys pick one if you draw attention to it, something we can help someone. Because I want to help people. I really do. And I think that's important.
Single moms are probably in bad shape.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of people. You're right, though. Single moms, because you got the kids, you can't go to work. Yeah, all that. So glad to see you, Becca, by the way. Glad you're here, as always. You get to listen to the world's worst medical commentary, but I'm pretty good at social destruction, so that's pretty good. Jennifer writes, did you see the risk test, 15-minute results? Yeah, there's good tests out there. Some of them are going to come into being. That will be helpful in time. Woke, glad you are here. Always good to see you. Near me in Dallas, the stores are mostly restocked except for TP. Talked to a guy at Walmart who said this week there was a run on board games followed by puzzles. I could understand that if you have to stay home playing a board game. We have Pandemic, actually. That's kind of ironic. And I also have Plague Inc. And I have it, the Kickstarter version has all the fancy little bits in it, so we can play that at some point. So I see. I knew how to do it. And I will tell you something. If you had played Plague Inc. before this had happened, you actually would have known better how to deal with this. It's absolutely crazy, but it is true here. So thanks for sending the the screenshot. Yeah, it looks like the things are pretty full in most places. And I don't think the problem with the food supply in the short term is going to be getting, how should I say, the warehouse supplies. I think the problem is going to be how you get it from point A to point B, although there's going to be a lot of problems with farming and agriculture this year because those areas are heavily dependent on migrant labor moving around a lot, and you really can't do that, and you wouldn't want to see that happen. So if this goes on an extended length of time, there are problems that you need to be aware of. Okay, so ROC is in Rochester. Oh, that makes sense. Okay, so I haven't been to Rochester in a really long time, but I wouldn't mind going. Actually, when was the last time I was in Rochester? Probably when I was working over at American Expediting. So anyway, I've been wanting to visit Western New York. I have some dear friends in Buffalo. When this settles, maybe I'll go out that way. All right, Tom, why are there still no masks? Why are they not distributed? My state government is asking for them. So the masks are coming out of the 3M plant that's in eastern South Dakota, and the government is sucking them all up and probably just aren't getting them out fast enough. I mean, the problem is, and I don't know which state, you have to remind me where you are, Brian, because I don't remember who's where precisely. I mean, some people I know, but I don't remember where you are, and I apologize for that. But ultimately, they've been kind of just getting them distributed out, and there have been issues in the interfaces between parts of government. You have to remember, government's a really creaky thing. If President Trump or Governor Cuomo, or pick whoever you want, says you want to do something, that means he talks to a deputy, who talks to a manager, who talks to a fulfillment guy, and there's like 10 different layers of what happens in this. And so it takes a little while, and then you have to conjunct the people talking to each other. That's no excuse, but that's actually how government works. So hopefully that happens. I'm glad to see things are getting restocked in California. Good here. Let's see. Becca writes, I saw a quote somewhere that said, remember, we are the virus Earth wants to destroy. There's a lot of people who are on the ecological side of things, let's say, who actually look at this way. I actually had a conversation with someone who was thinking that way, saying that the virus was Earth's way of trying to remove a lot of people. I know some people who look at it from the religious perspective that way as well. And I personally think, that all we can do is we can go ahead and try to help one another. And, I guess if you want to look at it a certain way, a silver lining maybe to this is that the time we have now to think about things gives us a chance to question some of our presumptions and maybe do things differently than we've done to this point. I think whatever we disagree upon, we all agree there are a lot of things that could and should be done better. And maybe that's a place to begin the conversation, especially with what this bill is. I mean, this bill is just trash. And they're already talking about a phase 4. I mean, how much money are they going to print? I mean, if they're just going to print everyone a whole bunch of money, why don't you give me $1 million so I can get a little palace up here on the lake? You guys can all come for the house party. You want a hobby? I know we do want that. Maybe that's what I should do. Maybe I should get back into politics. I'll run, and I promise to erase everyone's debts. Would that be good? 0 debts. That'd be great. You would get your Hobbit house. Everyone gets a house. That's fine. We would do that. Dana's saying the Hobbit house. We actually had this idea once upon a time of building like literally like a bag end type house into the earth. It's kind of a fun, quirky thing. You could probably get away with it up here in Maine too, where we live, but that's neither here nor there. James was saying he saw riots in other countries. Yeah, I mean, riots happen. Let's see. McSpirit, Illinois numbers are wrong. They're only testing people who are admitted to the hospital. Nurse practitioner friend has seen mild to bad cases, but they didn't meet criteria for important admission. So, yeah, I mean, the numbers are wrong everywhere. I think the numbers of people sick are being under, but I think the numbers of people dying are also under because, 1, there are people dying at home. We've seen that in multiple countries now. And 2, there are people dying from causes that are related to COVID that aren't put together. We don't know what's out there. But I heard, speaking of Rochester, since, we got Joey here from the ROC, one of the things that I was hearing about from Rochester was this idea that they were, there was someone was listening to the scanners of the EMS, and there were all these cases that were being talked about and they were being handled, and then they just made them go home. They never pop up on any statistics. They were never seen. They were never calculated. And so there's obviously a lot of number games going on, and it's not all malicious. It's just the function of a system that cannot meet the need. And that's going to be a problem. So I always tell people, don't worry so much about the numbers, worry about the trend lines. And that's why when I'm reporting the numbers to you every day, I take the time to do the mathematics and figure out what we're dealing with people dying versus people recovering, because that's the only thing we really know. We can presume people who were really sick who died really died. We can presume people who were really sick who recovered really recovered. Beyond that, I don't feel comfortable with any of those numbers. And I think they're probably off by an order of magnitude, which is really interesting to me. And that's why some people say, well, not that many people are going to die from this. On the other hand, we don't know about long-term effects. A lot of people think there are long-term neurological effects. And, I've seen stuff like that, like with my wife's chronic Lyme, and it's something I'm very concerned about. I remain concerned about. It's one of the things we'll keep a close eye on. Let's see. Panda on Fire writes, I believe this virus emerged naturally and not do any malfeasance or maleficence. Sorry. It was a crisis too good to ignore by the CPP. I assume you mean the CCP, by that, the Chinese Communist Party. That's very possible. Look, I mean, it's entirely possible that this originated for some natural reason. I guess I'm skeptical, but I'll admit that's possible. And that China, seeing there was a bad situation, decided to do this. Okay, well, let's lock down Wuhan, but let it go four corners to the wind. Let it go to Thailand so we aren't at strategic disadvantage. There's a lot of history. I mean, if you've read Sun Tzu, if you actually read history, like, for instance, they don't really teach you history. When you go to school these days, you get this anesthetized version of history which talks about the world bending upward in an arc of justice. No, history's nasty. It's a bunch of people playing tricks on one another, kill one another because they want each other's stuff. That's really how it went down. And the only thing was how different people did it at different times. And China's had a long time. That country hasn't stayed together for 6,000 years because they're not clever about how to handle a problem. And for them, the problem of having their economy shot and that other people were going to remove their supply chains was to create a learned dependency around the world. Did they do that? I don't know. Would they do that? Possibly. It certainly fits their history. People forget that just 50 years ago, they killed like 50 million people and had cannibalism in their country. I'm not even making that up. It's a matter of public record from the Chinese Communist Party. It was one of the things that Mao got wrong.
People were ragging on me.
I know. Well, that's what happened. The Great Leap Forward was, a leap into a pool of acid. That's what ended up happening. They literally said Mao woke up one morning and he said they were going to have steel production. So what they did was they made the people melt down all the pots in the country, and they made this slag steel that was worthless to go ahead and prove that they had the power of thinking to make this happen. And then when they couldn't cook their food and everyone starved because they spent all their time making steel, first they were lectured for being politically incorrect, and then they ended up going ahead and fighting over how to survive. And then that thing kind of got brushed under the way as sort of, well, that was late, Mao. It doesn't matter. They purged his associates, and eventually they said, oh, capitalism isn't so bad. You get Deng Xiaoping after Zhou Enlai. I'm just saying that the world is not what you think it is. And if you really understand history for what it was, not what it is, you do realize that these crises happen. And it's really interesting to watch how states play with one another. We'll watch how the U.S. and China work alongside. Trump was out there today talking about Xi, saying that they're getting along very well. And the question is, what do you believe from what China's reporting? I am skeptical for a lot of reasons, and we'll see what the truth ends up being. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Franklin writes, I work for a city and have considered using my personal days, not sick yet, but hoping to stick in and maybe be able to change policy in a good direction. I hope so, man. Hopefully you do a good job. We need people out there doing it. If you ever need a couple pieces of advice here, I'm definitely glad to do that. So let's see. Jennifer says, I don't know Greg Hanley, the owner of the SOBA recovery, who posted his result on Facebook. So, Andrea, hey, from New Mexico, glad to see you. Always a pleasure to speak to someone from the land of enchantment. I've had a couple experiences out there. I grew up in Arizona, so I do that. Franklin writes, there's 70,000 homeless in L.A. County. The liberal unlimited guilt and sympathy for them is now looking differently with a public health crisis they can't observe. Well, you're going to have to deal with them, California, and this is one of the things you're going to have to actually be really aware of these people, what you want to do with them, how it ends up working. That's a choice you're going to have to make. This is really weird. So there's a delay on my camera right now, and usually my camera runs real time. Am I paused?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So usually my camera runs real time to what I'm doing, but there was a little bit of a lag, and it was really creepy because I was watching myself, but it was like watching a like a version of myself that's running a couple seconds behind. Strange.
That would be creepy. This horror movie too.
It really was. Yeah, no, I felt like something was happening. I was waiting for Morpheus to jump out and say, Tom, this isn't what it looks like. But anyway, the 70,000 homeless, I mean, really, they're going to have to figure out a way to kind of separate them. And a lot of that's caught up in California rents. You know, I'll tell you a funny story. Okay. You guys always like stories. I was driving through northern Idaho and I found these two hippie hobos from California who needed a lift to Spokane. So I picked them up along the way because I figured, why not? You know, I'm a free spirit, they're a free spirit. And it was kind of interesting because we are going different ways. But I learned a lot about homeless camps in California. And there's like a whole homeless migration that happens during different seasons. You have the rainbow people, and there's even an economy of it. The real hardcore hobos basically make money servicing people who are retirees who bought RVs so they can live on their pensions more comfortably. And there's this whole weird internal economy to it that I never knew existed. It's actually fascinating. But these are people who just chose to not deal with problems. Like the one guy, he was a kid from New Jersey. He said, I realized that Social Security would be broke by the time I got there. So why the hell was I trying in life? And I've been on the road 7 years since. So they had abandoned their car somewhere in Montana, apparently, and I gave them a lift for, about 30 miles. And then, I think that was the week that Walmart stopped carrying guns. So I think I dropped them off in a Walmart parking lot, if I remember right, which was perhaps a little spiteful of me. But they appreciated it, and that's what they asked for. So I was happy to do that for them. And they can continue on their way. And I even gave them a couple bucks to try to help them out. But yeah, the problem of people who choose alternate lifestyles and who just don't want to conform is going to be a big problem in this because we're going to have those issues. And with California specifically, they have made a choice to be very permissive culture. And now they're going to have to deal with the consequences of that decision in a crisis. That's not to say everything's bad. I mean, you're going to have different choices and different opportunities, but it means your solutions are going to need a lot more buy-in from your public. And you're going to have to figure out a way to do that. Otherwise, more people are going to get sick and you have a higher risk of violence. That's the one thing I would say. As much as I say New York has this food supply problem, I remember the LA riots, and I know there are some underlying tensions there that could come out and cause a problem. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. Let's see. Look more like a Sith Lord. So I don't know. I'll try to look. I should be the silent but deadly type, What do I look like now? Proper hobo? What do you think, dear?
You look like no, you look like a Sith Lord. You're just wearing plaid.
Should I say, I've gone to ludicrous speed. Was that good? All right, let's see. Dark helmet references aside, Samsung writes, Tom, do you think the workman's comp system is going to crash when workers in critical industries start getting infected after being forced to show up for work? That's a great question. I don't know the answer to it because I don't know how well funded it is, but I'm going to take a look at that because I want to thank you for that question. I do think there's probably limits of how much is in there that could be an issue, but I don't know if they've indemnified or there will have to be exemptions there where that wouldn't work. I'd be kind of curious, but that could be a big problem if people are out. But I don't know that people have long-term injuries. They're just out for 14 days for the most part. And if you end up dying, obviously a workman's comp claim is going to be the least of your concerns. So I would tend to think absent a massive draw, it would be solvent, and that would not be a hard problem to fix. Kate Ruggiero, I hope I'm saying that right. I apologize if I'm not. Hi, I'm an ICU nurse in Colorado. Thank you for your podcast, Tom. I appreciate your input and time. Hey, thanks, Kate. Good luck out there, man. I hope you're doing all right. It's a hard job you guys have. I appreciate that, and hopefully you don't have to deal with too many codes. Let us know what you hear. One of the things that we hear, and one of the things I've speculated on, is that you're going to have a lot of people hospital shopping if you don't have a standard thing out there. Like I was reading Northwestern University was thinking of having a universal DNR standard for patients who go in there, or, having certain restrictions on ventilators, whereas other hospitals were being more lax with their guidelines. And as the public comes to understand that different private hospitals have different guidelines, they're going to go to different places. And especially for if they follow the New England Journal of Medicine standards, which basically prioritizes young people over old people, if it becomes aware that there's a hospital that does that differently, you may very well see people drive 600 miles to go to an ER in a different place if there aren't borders in there, because people want to live, and I don't blame them for that. So they really should look at having a standardized protocol from the CDC, just for the protection of the doctors, if nothing else. But on the other hand, then you end up with death panels, and who wants to be the politician who does that? See, this is a problem why things don't happen. Politicians don't want to get in front of a crisis because they're going to fail. I mean, who wants to be the guy who had the big plan that didn't work? You know, it'd be like, oh yeah, we tried D-Day, but oops, we fell in the channel. That sort of problem. You don't want to be that guy. No one wants to be Custer. So what they do is they let other people at the bottom say, well, they'll figure it out autonomously, so no one has to take the blame for the fact you can't solve things. I mean, very few people are going to step up to a crisis like this at the big policy level, because the truth is, you would get up there every day, sort of like I do with my show, and say, okay, here's today's flavor of turd sandwich. Take a bite and try to go ahead and put some mustard on it so it doesn't seem so bad.
I love mustard.
Well, I know you like mustard. That's why I picked that condiment, actually. But that's, you know, what you really deal with in this. That's really a problem. So let's see. Maureen asked, did I see the article about truckers refusing to deliveries to New York? Absolutely. And I reported on it. I've been watching it. And I knew that was one of the reasons why we were going to have problems, because driving to New York is a pain, and there's a lot of rules about that. And besides, when you drive food to New York, you don't really drive food to New York. What you do is you drive food to like upstate New York, Connecticut, or New Jersey. It goes on smaller trucks. If I remember, you can only take like a 20-foot truck into the city, and that there's a lot of restrictions. Now, I don't know if that's different in Brooklyn. You can maybe bring in 53s in there, but I know in Manhattan, you can't bring anything bigger than that. So that's one of the things. And yeah, it's going to be a problem. I mean, people are not going to want to have people coming in from places where the plague is bad. And I'm saying plague just because that's how people are going to see it, not because it is a plague. But I think that's important.
You know that one bridge we always get stuck on going into Boston?
Yeah, the one that you mean, yeah,
Right before the tunnel?
Yeah, no, I know the bridge you mean.
It was completely cleared of all vehicles.
Well, that's good. For once, you could drive into Boston. Boston's a mess.
That was shocking.
I hate driving in Boston.
Was shocking to see that.
Yeah, it was. This is called, I guess it's the Zohar Bridge, but that's not right. Begins with a Z. Anyways, but yeah, going into the big dig's a problem. Let's see. So Becca says, I don't understand why the president doesn't utilize some of these unemployed folks to help in contact tracing, delivery of the resources, etc. The truth is, they're busy chasing. I think the administration's chasing a lot of the problems they're trying to fix from before, and they get stuck trying to solve one problem before getting in front of it. And they're kind of hoping, and they actually need open source solutions to develop on their own. So I understand that's definitely a problem. But yeah, Trump needs to talk more intelligently. I agree, Brian, that was a problem. Let's see. I also cannot understand why U.S. president doesn't get U.S. companies to make the drugs we're seeing shortages, or just show some leadership. So what the problem was is, so apparently this happened, right? That they talked about a week and a half ago about making the drugs, and the drug companies basically seemed to talk Trump out of it. Remember, drug companies don't actually make products in the United States. What they do is they get chemicals in China that are imported to India, that are then built into drugs there and brought over here so they can maximize profits. The idea that they actually would make the drugs themselves is not something they want to do, because A, it's expensive, B, the environmental regulations are pretty difficult and stringent here compared to Asia, let's say, and C, they can't do it quickly. But the president could theoretically, using the, what's it called, that Defense Authorization Act, require them and recommit a factory to creating certain drugs. But we've seen, and this is one of the things I haven't been happy with, is a lot of Democratic governors have basically been banning hydroxychloroquine as a treatment, and I don't understand why. I understand it's not a catch-all to solve everything. Let the doctors decide. Why do we have governors deciding what pills are appropriate or not? It's absolutely crazy. I mean, let them try. It's compassionate care. That's the whole point of it. It's what's out there for when you don't know. And I'm not saying it's the end-all, be-all solution, but the politicization of this is stupid. And one of the mistakes that Trump keeps making is that he's waiting for big pharma and big medical decisions to come from those companies themselves, instead of demanding and showing the sort of leadership. But that goes through the whole institution, and that's one of the problems of the U.S. having its healthcare system the way it does. The upside of having private healthcare is you can have a higher quality of care for those who can afford it and who can get certain cutting-edge versions of things. But when you need a whole bunch of people helped quick, our system's not designed for that. And that's one other reason we're really struggling. So we definitely need to see better leadership. I agree, Becca. No doubt about it. Aloha, Nani. Good to see you. Good in Honolulu there. 120 confirmed collectively testing mediocre. Yeah, I've heard it's been terrible testing out there in Hawaii. And you probably had quite a few cases come through because I know with some of the Japanese cases, they actually ended up getting it in Hawaii. I think there was a couple on, I got to remember, they were on Maui and Oahu. So, but before they went back. And definitely we haven't seen that much testing. So, absolutely a problem here. Let's see. Newsom said he's going to leave it up to local offices whether or not to close gun shops. So I really hope they don't. But I understand people are paranoid, and a lot of people who don't know how to use guns have them in their hands. I'm sure this will go well. It's so. What's funny though? I have to laugh because like a lot of the people who were buying guns. I was reading this story from Omaha, and it was about this gun store of a bunch of Californians, and a lot of them he represented them as left leaning. So I'll just say this: they were saying, "I want to buy a gun." They're like, "You need a background check." They're like, "What do we need that for?" And the guy was like, "Exactly." It was just really ironic. And you know what? You have these things for the things you can't anticipate. And look, I'm not saying that government is always right or wrong. I'm not saying that. But ultimately, one thing that I hope everyone's learning, and it's not a partisan value at all, is self-sufficiency and the right to self-defense. They were in there for everybody, and everyone should take advantage of them. It actually creates a civil society when people have to respect one another. When you have to count on a referee to make you get along with someone else, that's when you get bullied. If you have to wait for the teacher to come protect you because you're the beat up kid. Whereas if people are afraid you're going to punch back, they don't beat on you anymore. And that's all guns really do. America has had a ton of guns going back since our founding. And basically, we live in a more violent time now when we have all these sort of things. Why? Probably because everyone's on drugs, everyone's pissed off, everyone's on edge, we work a million hours, and it's a hard society to live in. And now that we're sitting back thinking about things, maybe we'll think and do things differently. Let's only hope. Let's see. Tony, good to hear you. I hope all is well up there in Oregon. Had a great time visiting there this year. It's a lot of fun here. James is telling me it takes an hour and a half to get him in PA at the moment, the appointments and the license. Let's see. Andrea writes, first-time gun bearer. Got my first Mossberg 500 last week. Never thought I would buy one, but it feels like shit could get crazy, and I feel safer knowing I have one. And you know what you'll find? You will find you feel more confident having one. You will find that you have the ability to make decisions for yourself, and it's a feeling that is addictive. Liberty, pretty cool. California is 10-day background for guns or ammo. Well, that's what you need. That would go days afterwards. New Mexico is 20 minutes. That doesn't surprise me either. Let's see here. Kate writes, at the University of Colorado Hospital, we are awaiting the storm. So I'm guessing you're in Boulder then. Our hospital, which is usually at 100% capacity, is just at 60% as all elective surgeries have been canceled. Quiet, but we are ready. Yeah, I've read that. Actually, I was reporting on this today, that the supplies, the American, what's it called? Society of Hospital Pharmacists or something. I forget the letters of it precisely, but it's in the show notes. They were reporting all sorts of shortages, and that's one of the things with COVID is going to force that. It will be coming, Kate. Hopefully, you guys can get some rest now ahead of time. And if you ever need points or tips, of what other doctors are talking about, nurses, don't be shy about reaching out. I get a ton of networks, and if there are specific questions that come up, we can be a resource. We can definitely hook you up with some people. If you're not in the Telegram chat, by the way, why aren't you? t.me/coronavirus central. And there's a lot of people there for networking. And we can get some people who are actual medical professionals. You let people know you are. There are people who will reach out to you. It's kind of loose and it works out good. Oh, glad to see we get some people in Santa Fe making friends with each other. That's nice. I like that. Our state is seriously suggesting it in Tennessee, diapers on their face in garbage bags. Well, you could do worse than 2 garbage bags, if you're dealing with this.
I know what you meant by that. 2 garbage bags.
We all gonna die anyway. There's this video. Maybe we'll have to show it to you later. It's hilarious. This woman from Memphis who she's ready though. You gotta give people ready. People make fun of people who have inadequate provision. People who are trying are ahead of the game. You're better off trying and not having enough than not trying. And there's a lot of people who have been really not grateful. So really bad. So Andrea writes, this is the best podcast I've been prepared from day one because of Tom. Very grateful for this. Hey, look, I am the paranoid guy up on the mountain, but I can see things. That's what I do. I got a way of things ahead of time. And I try to put my thinking to your service. And hopefully, and you guys tell me, I try to give you a way to think about problems that will allow you to not have to depend on me to narrate everything and to really understand how to look at your local area. To tell you the truth, what I'm doing, just to give you an idea how far ahead of the game I am, I'm literally talking to everyone in my town, making sure we have food supplies, making sure we have procedures in place. If things get badly, how we can separate ourselves if need be, and those sorts of questions, because that's what you need to be thinking about. If this gets real bad, how are you going to keep safe where you are? That could be partially your family, that could be partially your neighborhood, but you want to try to have a bigger bubble, a sustainable bubble around you. And that's where you need to be thinking. And just keep your eye on the news. At this point, we sit back, we watch, and hope for a better solution, because there's a lot of things that go wrong economically, politically, whatnot. And I'm not at all confident in the government response to this, especially in the United States. Some states are doing pretty well, but it may overwhelm them anyway. Some states are doing very poorly, and we'll see which ones end up working out to what it benefit. But we'll keep an eye on New York. New York's got a lot of problems right now. We'll see if it pulls through, but someone else could jump in front of it. You know, Seattle looked like it was going to be a real train wreck, and it seems to have at least settled a little bit. So maybe they had the benefit of being first in terms of getting a more aggressive response. Okay, Christy rides about the seat parking lot. We'll skip over that. Sebastian, good that you're here. What would I say? It's good to see you. Our good friend from Quebec, who is also one of our moderators. That is awesome. Let's see, Canada, I got a chunk of money for confirmed COVID-19 cases. That does help buying supplies for when I get out next time, getting someone to buy some for me. So, bonsoir up there in Quebec. Let's see. Same season. They want to see the video?
Yeah.
What, you mean the one with the lady?
Yeah.
Well, share it if you want. Share the link. I don't care.
You want to play it?
No, well, I can't. How am I going to play it? They're not going to be able to see it.
My phone.
You want me to just hold the video in front of here?
Yeah.
I don't know how well that'll work. All right, let's see how well it'll work. So Dana is hijacking the show, and that's fine. She's allowed to do that. She's in charge here. We all know that. You need some humor. I don't know if people find this funny or sad, but okay. Is this the video?
Yeah.
All right. So there was all right. Let me give you a preface for this. So this is a little bit of dark humor. And look, for those who are easily offended, go away for 2 minutes. So this is a little bit of dark humor that we have from people who are having ways to deal with it. There was an interview with this black lady in Memphis who was trying to come up with a solution. There was just a couple people and how they were preparing for the coronavirus. And so someone took parts of that video and made a remix. So yeah, let's see if you guys can see this.
I love that lady.
I don't know how well this is going to work, but let's see.
Children at Treadwell Middle and Elementary schools are not playing around. And don't nobody want their child to be sick. And don't nobody want to take that virus to their house. No sack, my children. No sack, my children. Don't wipe my children backpack down when I got them out of school. Sure did. Got them gloves, sure did. No sack, my children. The flu can the old folks and them here, so let's hope we're gonna die. Who won't?
So there you go, and I'll give credit to What the F Rob for providing that entertainment interlude. So I mean, people are figuring out ways to laugh at it, and here's the truth: when you deal with trauma, this is true. I wish Rob was here; he's our resident psychologist. But when you deal with trauma and people who deal with extremes, I don't want to hear me.
It was an accident.
Anyways, people who deal with extreme trauma will tell you sometimes you got to laugh, sometimes you got to cry. These are things you deal with. Let's try to laugh a little bit. So hopefully, you can do that. And, I find that funny. It's a little sad, but it's kind of funny. And you know what? I give her credit for it. People give that woman a hard time, not me. The truth is shoes are one of the biggest ways you can contaminate things. She's ahead of the game. There might be a day where I'm rocking the Dollar General look. You never know. Although I have footsies, so that's okay, You know what would be funny? I could imagine this. Like, imagine the future where we're fighting over protective equipment. People would be like saying, I got hefty garbage bags. You got that crap, Value Right Old Roy brand from Walmart. And you're going out there thinking this is the high quality PPE. Be like, yeah, no, I got 2-ply. You didn't think you'd be fighting over toilet paper. You get Sherman Ultra Soft. That stuff's premium. All right. So a little bit of humor for you all, hopefully here. A lot of Americans don't want to go back to business as usual, writes Margot rather, and she's right. And I think it's a fair question. Is business as usual? If business as usual means that those people up at the top get that giant bailout, and we get out there and we get to be told, okay, now go pay 4 months of rent on the job you don't have, then people are going to riot. And you know what? I don't blame them. I might be out there with you. I'll be the guy looking around there, looking like I just walked out of a stormtrooper, but that's fine. I'll be out there. Maybe it'll intimidate someone. But realistically, I mean, I don't think it's that people don't want to work. I think a lot of people do. I mean, people dislike the abnormality of this, but realistically, we can't pretend this didn't mean something. And even if in the best case scenario, the coronavirus, God bless, goes away and that we don't see people suffer, a lot of us will realize that a lot of things went really wrong with this response and it will be just dumb luck or divine intervention that saved us from the consequences of our own terrible actions. And that being the case, I think that it's something we really should take and have a conversation about. And I try to offer some perspective on that. And we have interesting people talking to one another. Like, take this group here. This is something that really does make a difference. So I think that that's good. So let's see. One tall girl says, you should do Johnny Walker Blue. Oh, I want to, believe me, but I can't afford to blow that sort of money. I mean, I put all of our money into prep. So I can definitely, I mean, look, I will be eating high class canned foods for a considerable amount of time, no matter what happens. I've committed to that fully. But I didn't get a lot of liquor on the basis that I would drink it. So that's an honest answer for you. I mean, whatever your libation is, but we do have some. I mean, if it gets bad, maybe I'll do my bad Russian impression, put the hat on, and we'll do some vodka. So, what you like to do? Здравствуйте, товарищи. It's Tom up in North Woods. Get ready. I don't speak Russian. I know a couple words. I would like to learn it, but I've been too busy learning French because it's useful to me, and I'm going to deal with that. So let's see. Andrea writes, Tom, do you think the concern is more that people will loot stores, home burglaries, or both? I think home burglaries would probably worry me a little bit more because the cops won't be there. I mean, we saw cops sitting on the toilet paper rolls in a couple places. So I guess as long as they're sitting there, that they're going to be there. If that becomes an issue, you won't see it too much. But the problem is if you don't think people have things, that will be the issue. And if you are preppers or people who have prepared, let me give you a pro tip. I say this all the time. If you're the person who really did the smart thing and prepared for 12 months, and you've been trying to help people in your community or letting a lot of people know, just know that they might be coming for you if they end up short. So you might want to look like you're in a little more need. And I know that's terrible and a bit deceptive, but honestly, this is like one of the basic things in preparation you learn. If everyone goes to go get food from the food bank and you're not in that line, people know you got something going on. And at a moment when things are going well, it seems ridiculous, but you always have to think, what are the motivations? What are the human behaviors? You say I got those little things behind me. I got the little finger guy who got knocked over there. He always said, if you ever watch Game of Thrones, I always think of what everyone's thinking, what they're doing in any situation. Everyone is my friend. Everyone is my enemy. And, beyond people who are in your intimate trust circle, desperation makes people do funny things. It's why we work at the beginning to make sure our communities and people near us are prepared. But if things begin to dissemble, it means you got to be real smart about making your assessments about who does what. That's why my book said when I had it out before Amazon took that down too, that we were going to need to have information awareness be the first step. I absolutely think that's important. And like James says rightly, guns do prevent things. Although the most important thing with any weapon, if you have a gun or whatever you have, make sure whatever you have for self-defense is something you're comfortable with using. If you don't know how to shoot a gun, a bat is a better tool. I mean, just learn how to do it. And whatever you get, take the time to do that. Find a range. And you will find that the people who are into that will be more than happy to instruct you. I mean, most people in the gun community actually support people expanding that. And I think a renewed defense of the Second Amendment is an exciting development of this, if nothing else. So I think that is good. So hospitals are having those meetings. Oh, I know. Hospitals are probably having awful meetings. I hear about them. I mean, we have a lot of doctors that listen to this broadcast, which I think is interesting, because I'm so used to being on the other side of the aisle, but I guess I was a policymaker once upon a time. It's just been a while. I just went out there and I was a little too aggressive about it, I guess. So New York's ventilator strategy is available on their website. It's eligibility, severe risk stratifying score at randomization. Yeah, I mean, they what they try to do is they try to make it fair. They try to look at who will live the longest, or rather ask a combination of who will live the longest and who will benefit the most, and then they try to randomize it beneath that. Although I don't know if it's going to work that way. I mean, how much you want to bet Congress is getting their tests randomized? I wouldn't bet too much on that. Let's say, Pillman, hey there, Matt here. Don't let people affect your past. You're finding good information, what matters now, and saving lives. Listen every day. I appreciate that, Matt. Yeah. I get asked a lot about my past because people always say to me, Tom, how can you be this awful individual who does these nice things? The truth is, I was never an awful individual. I got railroaded. That's all that happened. I'm the same person I've always been, and I just wasn't going to let people pick on people related to me, just like I wouldn't let people pick on you. I just don't care. I have to say the truth because I just don't have the patience to do it any other way. It makes me crusty at times, useful at others, and there's times you'll agree and disagree, but would you rather have someone honestly tell you the truth about what he thinks and go through it? And in all of that, there's never been any, and let me put this out there for the public record, I have no animus towards anyone. If I think you think something's stupid, I'll say that. I don't hate anyone for what they are or things they can't choose. That would be absurd. I do think people believe some stuff that's completely crazy. I call them on it. They think I think the same. They call me on it. We can have conversations. I try to learn. I try to evolve. And I realized the moment this happened, the old world that I lived in of identity politics and fighting on these things, it doesn't matter. There are tribes in the new world, I will tell you. They're the tribe of the people who want to survive, who are sane. Some of us are left, some of us are right, some of us are white, some of us are black, Asian, Latino, whatever, it doesn't matter. And this is the world we live in now. And I want to be with people who take this seriously because that's who I count on. That's who I think is important. And that's what I wanted around me. So I started building that community and I worked quickly. And because now that we have a real threat to worry about, playtime is over and we can actually get to the business of doing things. And that changes some things. I mean, it doesn't change everything, but it changes a lot of things. And so that's how I look at it. And, other than that, I mean, I spent a lot of time learning how to be persecuted, attacked, and how to keep things up when people were taking them down. So I guess my time wandering through the fringes is not a waste of time at any stretch. I made some very dear friends doing that. And I learned a lot of skills like podcasting I never would have known otherwise. The Lord puts you in the position to learn the things you need to learn. And that's been part of what I've been doing. So let's see. Joey writes, this whole thing has been pretty black pilled, but big white pill is it might be the best way to destroy this fake system. Yeah, I mean, there are silver linings to the clouds that are possible here. Let's see here. James writes, I feel money won't mean anything in the future, but trade for skill or equitable items. Absolutely, man. I mean, and we saw this, I reported on it, but maybe I didn't hit it hard enough, is that gold contracts are not necessarily being fulfilled. That's a big problem because if it's only spot gold that has value and you're not actually fulfilling contracts, if commodities start going down for force majeure, right? Or mortgages even, right? Mortgage-backed securities. A lot of these commercial notes depend on people who are small business long-term renters who are a AAA risk rating. Then you might have the whole system start to fall in on itself, and you're not going to put it back together again because it's literally a giant house of cards. Should that be what happens? That's why they're worried and they want to go back. Let's see. People say you're buying into panic. So that's it. You said it was terrible when I gave that advice. Just start coughing and they'll leave you alone.
It'll work.
It does work. It was great advice. No, I told someone how to get out of something. Although one guy was doing that and he got arrested. They had to throw out like $35,000 worth of produce from a supermarket. He said he got mad at someone. He started coughing over a whole section of things. They had to take him out of the supermarket. They disinfected, threw away $35,000. He said it was a prank. Not necessarily that funny. Joey writes, did you see those videos of the bridge in China where a riot broke out and the protester beat the crap out of the cops and flipped their cars? Absolutely, I did see that. And there were actually cops from one province arresting cops from another province. I can just imagine like a scene on the Piscataqua River at the southern border of Maine where a bunch of people from Massachusetts are trying to come in here and the Maine National Guard's like saying, you're not crossing the river, It's just like, and that could happen. I mean, or make it more simple. Maybe, that in New York, they're sitting on the other side of the Hudson, and, in the East River, you have a Kurt Russell episode breakout in Manhattan. Let's hope not, but maybe. So Cole writes, hey, Tom, thanks for the info every day. Been listening from home. Thanks for showing up, buddy. I appreciate it. Let's see. Jennifer writes, I read that coronavirus is a virus that went from animal to human, swine flu, bird flu. Does that mean COVID-19 could not go to human and animal and vice versa? I've read some stories about cats being carriers actually today. They just came out today. I don't know what I want to put into them, but a lot of times they don't necessarily spread things unless they scratch you. It's not like they tend to be active carriers in the sense that they expel it, but it is a possibility. I mean, if it did come from animal transmission, it's something we have to keep an eye on. I don't think we understand all the transmission vectors. It's definitely a problem. So let's see what else we got here. We're continuing forward here on the show that keeps on giving, you know? All right. I just got to find where I'm, because every time I get to the bottom of the list, I have to start all over again here. Let's see. Did I see Newsom today? How do you feel he is getting the state ready? Why did we get our ship before New York? Because San Diego was closer. I think it was just a matter of the New York ship wasn't ready. It was in Norfolk. They expedited that, so you got it a little faster. Do I think Newsom? I think California's been more aggressive than Cuomo in some ways. But California had hints this was going on faster. New York had a big problem getting tests early on, and I think they were covering it up. There was a lot of stuff. I was talking about it coming out of Buffalo where items were being concealed. So, why states do well. I mean, the truth is everyone's going to get it. If these projections are anywhere near right, they estimate 40 to 70% of people will eventually get it. And remember, when we're talking about New York, even at this point, with all the people who have it there, we're at most talking at 1% of the population. And I don't even think we're that high yet. I still think we're definitely well beneath that. So a lot more people have to get it. And so people go out there, and I read these things all the time. So, the flu kills this many people. Well, wait till as many people who have the flu have coronavirus, and you'll have a much better number. Astor writes, allegedly it's dying down in China. Yeah, now the people are rioting. There was actually a really touching scene. There was, I saw this. They had people collecting the ashes from the people who had died they weren't allowed to get before when the contagion was fully going out there. And let me tell you something. There were a lot of people waiting for ashes, a lot more than 3,000, put it that way, in total. It just goes to show you those numbers were a load of crap. So let's see. Michael writes, I highly recommend Scott Adams, the Dilbert Cartoon podcast. He offers a smart perspective on Trump and an optimistic realist commentary. So I have read his book about how, and it's a brilliant book, about how to, fail at absolutely everything and still succeed. You really just have to put together the skill sets you have in a way that's authentic to yourself and find a way to provide something people relate to. Scott Adams is a brilliant guy. So Mr. Silverback writes, was working on the garden. I'm sorry I'm late. I hope everyone's well. What are you doing in here? Go back to the garden, man. You're doing something more useful. Glad to hear this. Let's see. Moontree Collective says, sorry if you've covered this already, but there are several sides of Italy recovering. Mixed reports via Google. Italy's death number went up. I mean, I think that it's flattening somewhat in Italy. I don't want to say it's recovering. The problem is there's still a lot of people moving about. And even I think what people need to be realistic about is these numbers we are seeing are not the peaks of this case. If Italy, let's say Italy's effort was completely successful and you got the virus down, you're not going to get down to 1 with as many people as you have moving around there. But let's say you get down to a flu-like level, you're still going to have these problems where a couple hundred people are going to die every day. You're not going to have as many per se, but that whole thing, the price of successful interventions is you lengthen the pandemic. So in Italy, you may have this exist for several months. Now, that depends on how much damage this is doing and how many people are moving about. I can't tell you that. I can say that it doesn't look like Italy is going quite as stratospheric as it was before, but they're still reporting absolutely huge number of cases. And as you say, rightly, it is mixed evidence. So we'll have to keep an eye on it, what's going on out there. But I would point, there was a story I talked about today of the mayor of Bergamo who said a lot of people were dying who were not being counted as coronavirus cases, but there was no cause of death given. And they happened in ways where there really wasn't a way to track it. So is the number worse than we know? Potentially. And honestly, we won't know until we hear from the Italians themselves. From what I hear in the not the nursing homes, the nurses, the doctors, the ICUs, is pretty bad. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. So population density in Los Angeles. Let's see, my brother's having fun. And Becca writes, Astor says, erase my debts. Well, there you go. I mean, maybe who knows? If this gets bad enough, maybe I'll try to do it. Lord knows that I'll piss off half of America. But I actually did write a platform for how to do that one day. But I'm not running a campaign, and I'm not doing finance reform. The only way I'm going to do it is if you people can figure out how to spell my last name. And considering I struggle with it sometimes, you're going to have a hard time with that. All right, Becca writes, it is not uncommon for a virus to jump species, Ebola, HIV, influenza, coronavirus, but there is no evidence I know of that coronavirus goes to another species. from humans to another species. There's one case of a dog in Hong Kong, and I saw a case of a cat in Germany, but it could be surface contamination. So we haven't seen widespread versions of it, and China didn't report that. We'll see if it ends up going. Haven't seen that yet. Good to see you, Audra. Welcome here. So, plant-based compass. Good to see you here. 2 questions. Please explain the difference between mortality rate and case fatality rate. Why is the difference important? I'm happy to do that. Mortality rate is the number of people who die in your total population. So in the United States, that would be 330 million. So if you were taking the mortality rate of COVID, for example, and I'm just 330 million is an estimate number, but we're just going to use it for the purposes of demonstrating, since I think it is relevant here, that if we were to say the mortality rate in the United States, we would have to take 2,297 divided by 330 million. Let me just put the zeros in here. And so you'd find out a case fatality rate is like 0.0006. But the the mortality rate, I apologize. The case fatality rate is a different question. It's saying of the number of people who've had the virus, which as of right now is being reported, this is from BNO News, at 105,116, how many people ended up dying from that? And as of right now, that number is 1,452. So you can just do a quick thing. That's going to be about 1.4% of people. Now, keep in mind that what makes that a little misleading as well is that we are talking about a situation where, as of right now, 1,452 deaths, 2,297 recoveries, but we have 105,116 reported cases, which means we don't actually know what's going to happen yet for a little over 100,000 of these cases. And so it's really premature. Anyone who's talking about knowing the case fatality rate of this really doesn't understand. And the reason the models disagree so much is the question is how many people are going to get infected. And the idea early on was to shut it down so you don't have widespread endemic community spread. That's why the tests were so important early and why you wanted case tracing. The fact that it didn't happen means it's likely going to spread everywhere because we can't figure out everyone who has it and make them shut down. So we either have to all shut down, which is an option, but the government doesn't seem to go that way. Or conversely, we're going to eventually deal with this going through over the course of time, some 40 to 80% of the people until we reach a point where so many people have had it, the virus runs out of host and it goes away, or it mutates, in which case then we're living in the Mad Max timeline if it gets worse or it goes away. Now, it can go away, interestingly. The Spanish flu actually did that to some extent. From what I've read, it ended up mutating into a less virulent or strain so that it ended up going away of its own accord. Those things do happen. It still existed, but the new version wasn't as harmful, and therefore people didn't go nuts trying to kill it.
You have like 1,000 questions. You can't spend like 20 minutes per question.
I'm answering people. I like answering people. All right.
But you have a lot of them.
Well, I'm working on it. Did people want the answers? So number 2, province of New Brunswick.
I don't want to be in bed at 10 p.m.
Well, you looks. Anyways, question number 2, province of New Brunswick. All right, awesome, New Brunswick. We love New Brunswick. Okay, province of New Brunswick. COVID areas are in the low 40s with the first case of community transmission. Is now the time to stop going in public as much as necessary? Yeah, hopefully. And hopefully your province, your premier up there will do that. And definitely do that because I want you guys to come through okay. I like visiting up there, I don't want to have to go to Hopewell Rocks and get sick. So definitely you're going to want to do that. And you might as well do it earlier because right now the biggest number of people who have this in Canada that's reporting is in Quebec. Now, I personally find it harder to believe there are more cases in Montreal than there are in Vancouver or Toronto. But I suspect that has to do with a quirk that Quebec, like a lot of weird things in Canada, has its own health department that's probably being a lot more aggressive because it's less concerned about the social implications than they were in Vancouver, given the way that I know Trudeau's government looks at these things. So definitely it's a good time to stop going out and be smart about it, especially if you're in an urban area. If you're in Moncton, St. John, Fredericton, anywhere like that, you're going to want to be more mindful. Okay, so how far away are we from gold confiscations? I don't know. Let's keep an eye on that. I will watch for it. It hasn't happened yet. There's a lot of bank games happening. We'll see what happens. Okay, I don't know if it can jump between species one way, but I don't know anything. Yeah, we don't know yet. We'll figure it out. Let's see. McSparron asks, why are we not seeing the streets and buildings getting sprayed down with disinfectants like China and South Korea? It's a good question. The answer is we don't seem to know what we're doing well enough, and we can't do a quarantine in the United States like they did in China because our people would revolt. And as some of you have noticed, a few of us have guns and it would not go well. But what were they spraying was the question. Some people thought it was bleach. There's some other more obscure theories. I don't know. It's something you could do, but it doesn't happen that much. Josie, good to see you. The outlaw Josie Wales is here. I work at HVAC and mainly do residential work. We're considered an essential trade. Going to numerous homes is making me nervous. What are your thoughts on this? Protect your mouth, protect your eyes. There is some risk, obviously, that you're going to deal with. And I think it's fair to ask if, people have been assessed with this and to refuse to do that. I think you would have the right to do that. But I think it's curious that HVAC is considered an essential trade. I guess needing to keep things hot would matter. I can see why that would be, but you definitely want to be careful. And if you can provide yourself with a ventilator when you go into any facilities, as well as even if you have to get swim goggles, I think that would be well. Sarah asks, any word on how the medical treatments are going in New York? Governor got the drugs on Tuesday, right? When do you think we will see some definitive answers if it will be an effective treatment? I don't think you will. And I'm just saying this because everyone experiences this so differently that we are going to see different treatments work with different patients. I mean, if you were trying to do a proper study of what works, you wouldn't necessarily want to do it in that environment. Usually what we saw in China was about 2 to 3 weeks after an event happened, you got case papers out there, and those were just the original papers. They didn't get out peer-reviewed until a month later, so that might be a reasonable timeline for what you're going to see. Better that we should start looking at foreign studies, I think, and adapting them rather than waiting. So let's see what else we got here. Good to see you, Angela. Becca, let's see. Cole says you're down in Tallahassee. Good to see you. I was wondering, other than listening to you, where can I look for news? I listen to Peak Prosperity, Chris Martinson's podcast. If you look at covidreport.net, they have a lot of good sources. I think Dr. Paul Campbell does a good thing. Who's that? John Campbell, yeah. Paul Cottrell is interesting. He's a hoot. I like Mike Adams. Some people don't. But in terms of getting good news, I think you just have to aggregate on your own and look. True News? True News would work. If you like it from a Christian perspective, True News is good. You got to go find them now. Let's see. I don't know if you guys saw Steve Lookner's meltdown. That was pretty interesting. So, but that's a good question. Where you can look for news. I think those are good places. But COVIDreport.net actually does a good job aggregating. And also, if you're in the Telegram group, if you're a research follower, especially CVC, what would we call it? CV Central .research, I think. I can't remember the damn name of my own group. Isn't that terrible? I don't go in there. Those guys are serious, man. They intimidate me. Let's see what we got here. I'm just looking at the name of the group so I can tell you properly. So if you go to, what's the group type? CV or t.me/CV Central Research, you would find our group there. And there's a lot of news in there if you want to follow the tech parts of it and the research. Those guys scour every paper and they go on and on about it. Every now and then I go in there and then they tell me what's happening. And I'm like, okay, I'll try to make sense of that. So, all right, you guys saw the video. That's good. Did I discuss the idiot governor of Mississippi? No, I didn't have a chance to see what the governor of Mississippi did. I'm sure you're not a fan from what I'm hearing, but a lot of governors are needing to improve. I'll have to take a look at it and figure out what's going on. So Seattle may seem like it's doing okay, but all the nurses I talk to around here say they only get 1 mask a day. Hopefully they get you guys some more. We don't want you to go around with a bunch of bandanas looking like chulos up in the joint. That wouldn't work that well. So let's see here. What else we have? I don't have an N95 mask. My mask is a vacuum cleaner bag sandwich in a bandana. Vacuum filter is rated for 5 microns. Thoughts? That's actually clever. I think it works as long as you can cover it with a decent seal. Good for you. MD says, hey, late this evening, shelter-in-place order went in place in my little corner of Texas. Good. I hope all is well here. Glad to hear that. I'm just going through very fast here, reading what you guys have because I have to catch up. Audra says, what is Bill Lee thinking? I guess that's the Tennessee governor. Is Nashville in trouble? Lots of tourism and concerts here. Love to hear your thoughts. I think it's a mistake if your cities are allowing people to have them. And I think a lot of Republicans have been led astray, especially by the half-hearted response from the president and the donors. So I think that's definitely a problem. So James, stop talking about your gun abilities. So we don't want to hear that. Marina, I was born in Russia. I would love to learn Russian. Actually, maybe I'll come out dressed in my Slavic outfit one day. I actually love to get more in touch with that part of my future. I know my wife has a wonderful dress from Russia. So Elizabeth writes, Tom, hi from Arizona. Would you make a plug for those of us that make masks? And soon I'll be making isolation gowns. We can do this from our homes, except one has to get fabric, thread, and elastic. Absolutely. I would be glad to do that. And if you want me to reach a much bigger audience, shoot me something on Twitter, and I will make a point to mention it on the show next week. That's at Coronavirus Cast. I love sharing efforts that people are making on their own to be successful, because you don't need someone to. What are you doing?
I'm trying to get your attention.
What?
Chris Martinson was doing a thing.
Okay.
Hashtag Million Mask Challenge and hashtag Million Mask Mayday are trending. That's people that are coming forward, handcrafting masks, gowns, and other PPE.
So maybe Elizabeth and some others can help with that.
And there's a website, makemask2020.org.
So there you go, makemask2020.org. You probably want to get in touch with them, and if it's trending on Twitter, that means it's probably going to get a lot more attention. So
a lot of people are out there making them. So
that's good. That's exciting. Yeah, we want to let people know. Thank you for sharing that with me. I actually appreciate that. My brother's talking about I've never been an awful person. Oh, I don't know. I was a little awful when I was a kid, maybe just a little bit. Let's see. I'm just reading through real fast here because I want to try to get done at 9 here. Haslin writes, the problem with saying all people have a right to self-determination is a bad thing because one group of people is being defined that. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, whatever rules you have, they have to apply to everybody. That's what's going to be the case. Ross is here. Good to see you, Ross, our good friend in New Hampshire. I'm ready to build my greenhouse. Just got the materials today. Awesome. I think that's good. Becca was asking, can you find that lady on the news? Just type Memphis coronavirus on YouTube. You'll find it. Believe me, you don't have to look hard. Let's see. Second person died in New Hampshire today. I have antiviral cleaning solution. Awesome. My point earlier, what's your opinion about direct financial support of people? I will tell you this. If they decided to bail out the people directly with the amount they gave to banks, every adult in the United States could have got $16,000 instead of getting a loan for $16,000. And if you had broken it up to $4,000 over 4 months, you would maybe have put people in a better place. Just a thought. So, I'm glad you guys have a chance to listen. I listen to your podcast during my morning commute. You must commute to Halifax if you're listening to my podcast. But I understand it's definitely a big thing. So Governor of Mississippi forced local governments to drop social distancing efforts, such as takeout only for restaurants. I don't know why Mississippi did that. I feel sorry. I'm just going to say, if this virus is half as bad as we fear, the Deep South is going to get crushed by it. The extent to which the governments down there have been acting foolish is just beyond belief. And I get some of the reasons why that is. I suspect it's intensely political. I don't know what to tell you, man. I totally feel the other way about it. I mean, the thing is, there are a number of studies out there that are suggesting this has a really low rate of serious infection because it argues more people have been infected than we would know. But that doesn't really add up with the numbers so well either. It's probably somewhere more moderate, but I've made my projections that the baseline rate on this is 2 to 5%, which is bad enough. And in a breakdown scenario, that ends up being much worse. So I think those are things to be reasonably afraid of, but who knows? What I will say, I will look at this, Michael. I will take a look. What's the name of the governor of Mississippi? Can you guys, getting the hiccups here. If you guys tell me who that is, I'll be sure to shame the hell out of him on Monday. I have no problem doing that. It sounds like it's warranted. Anyway, so if you guys have any other questions, I am happy to take them here in the last minutes before we close up. Over what am I looking at this weekend? A chance to relax, and for one. But really, let's watch how the progression happens. Look if other states start putting up borders for people to not travel, how the courts handle that, and if governors listen to what the courts say. At some point, if this gets bad enough, the courts may say you have to keep borders open. A governor will tell the judge to go screw themselves, and that's when things will get really interesting. If those sorts of things start happening, where you start having actual hard borders. And the same thing's going to happen within the EU, but if it happens within the US, that will be really curious, and that will be a sign that people are very worried about the pandemic. At this point, I think it's just seen as a public health problem, not a public safety problem to the same extent. That would be a major evolution. And at that point, you might look at having much more involvement from the National Guard or that. But it seems like they want to go the other direction with this. The trade-off is more people will get sick, but they don't want the economy to be stuck in this problem. Because if the economy goes about 6 to 8 weeks like this, like it would, it's going to be very hard to get it started for a lot of different reasons, some financial, some ideological. And, we don't know what's going to happen. And the government doesn't like having unpredictable things. That's why they're throwing money at every problem. Another prediction is phase 4 will come at the end of next week, and it will promise more money directly for the people. It probably still won't be enough, and it will be an example of creating a problem tomorrow to solve an issue today. Not that we don't need to do that to beat the virus, but these are the things that we are dealing with. Michael, thank you for sharing that with me about Tate Reeves. People have just, Tate Reeves is Louisiana, Phil Bryant. So I will talk about Phil Bryant. I have no problem with doing that. We'll make sure we do that. And I just want to say thank you for everyone who tuned in. God bless each and every one of you. Do a quick little prayer here. Heavenly Father, I ask that all the listeners be protected, that we all find our way to safety, to greater truth, and that we all are able to take care of those around us and be able to enjoy the blessings of liberty and also of seeking a higher truth in these moments. It's okay to pray and to look for something a little bit bigger than yourself when you're dealing with these problems. It helps. It's not a load of crap. Just take my word for it. There's a reason I can see some things ahead of time. I've had a little bit of help. God bless you guys in Jesus' name. You guys have a very nice evening. I will be back. If you need to find me at Coronavirus Cast on Twitter, I'll probably be bumping around a little bit, and I will see you Monday morning. Thank you guys very much. Love you all. It's been wonderful to spend time. And if you guys have questions, ideas, concerns, send them to me. I always end up checking my email in between. And if you guys don't have that, Coronavirus Central at pm.me. And for those of you who feel so inclined, who are willing to risk a trip to the post office to do something, I put the address here in the thing. If you want to send a couple bucks, it helps out. It really does. You guys all have a good night. God bless.